Hello and welcome to Upper Pen. My name is Dakota, and today I'm talking with Thea Guazon about
That's
her
fun.
book, The Hurricane Wars. Thank you for being here, Thea.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you tell people a little bit about what the Hurricane Wars is?
Oh my
Like
gosh,
the story.
I'm so sorry. Did you hear my cat? He just meowed. I'm so sorry. You can edit it out.
Good.
Well, okay, so The Hurricane Wars is the first book in a fantasy romance trilogy, which centers on a pair of bitter enemies who somehow have to work together in order to save the world that they know. But the problem is that they hate each other so much. They are on opposite sides of a war. And so basically, the first book, it's about how the two of them try to reconcile these differences, their different political opinions, their different belief systems, and try to build something from that, some sort of alliance. And well, it's I guess we'll see whether it turns out to be successful or not.
I really hope it does, because you left quite a cliffhanger at the end. Like I was just like, no, it can't end here.
I know, I'm so sorry. That was actually the fault of my editors.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
they said, how about we make this end with like a bang? And so I said, okay, I might have an idea for that, but just so you know, if people complain, it's your fault.
I thought it was a really great ending though, because it really encapsulates the first book, which I'm not going to talk about in full because it's not even out yet. So I should just
Yeah,
stop
yeah.
talking about it. So one of the things that I absolutely loved about the Hurricane Wars is your introduction, which sounds really bizarre, but like it's such a good uh I don't want to say reason for the Hurricane Wars, but it was just such a good introduction into this world, about the wars in the Philippines and really colonization, right?
Right.
Um, so how, I guess, did it actually play that much of a like part when you were thinking about the overall war? Um,
I wouldn't say that there was any specific historical event that the book was based on, but the theme of fighting for freedom, it's a tale as old as time. It's a history that is really intertwined with my family's own history. So the Philippines was colonized thrice. First there was Spain, which lasted for like over 300 years. And that's why a lot of us have Spanish last names and why some of us look Spanish. And then there was the American colonization, the United States, which lasted for around, maybe I want to say, 48 years. And then after the US came Japan, which was not as long as the others. It started and ended with World War II. So,
yes.
so sorry. So my family are actually, they played a role in this history. My great grandfather and his father were actually freedom fighters. They led the rebellion against the Spanish government in their hometown. There's actually a history book that mentions them as being the most cruel of the revolutionaries. So I don't even want to think about what they did to earn that title. But when the Americans came, my great grandfather and his father, they resisted this new wave of colonizers. And because they resisted, they were arrested, and then they were tied to a cart which was pulled by horses, and then they were made to walk like 50 kilometers, like over 50 kilometers in the hot sun, barefoot. So it was just a really dark chapter. And then but they survived the American colonization. And then years later, my grandfather took up the cause against the Japanese. He was a guerrilla fighter. He was fighting for the liberation of the Philippines from Imperial Japan. And he would tell me stories about he would have to walk from the top of the mountain to the beach to get guns and ammunition from a waiting submarine. And meanwhile, my grandmother and her family, they were waiting out World War II in the swamps because the invaders burned their house because it was learned that they were supplying food for the guerrillas. And what happened to them was also really dark. There was a lot of suffering, and my grandmother's youngest sister actually died during this time because she was just a baby and she was severely malnourished because their mother's milk had dried up. So I remember my great grandmother telling me about how she had to squeeze cogon grass. She had to squeeze it to extract the liquid, and that was what she tried to feed the baby. So so it was bad. So that's one family member that I'll never know thanks to the war. So I think that these themes of loss and these themes of fighting for freedom, no matter the cost, I think that's what made it into my book. This history of battling oppression and just always moving forward towards the light at the end of the tunnel.
I really think that, excuse me, I really think that description helps when Alaric is his name, the main male protagonist,
Yes.
when he is trying to convince Taliesin to like stop fighting, right? She's a resistance fighter. And she's like, no, you don't understand. So like this introduction, I think, informs all of Taliesin's like, well, why wouldn't she just stop when it's hopeless, right?
Yes.
So I really loved that you included that because it just shut down any reason to not keep fighting.
Yes. I
Um,
think that Eric himself I think he believes that he is doing the right thing. And that was also informed, that like that perspective that was also informed by my own experiences living in Southeast Asia. Like there I don't want to say there are two sides to every story because of course like the oppressors are always in the wrong, but there's a sense of like people do what they do because it's what they were raised to believe was correct. So sometimes like we have to fight against a lifetime of grooming, brainwashing, propaganda. And I think that I am also guilty of holding on to certain beliefs that when that for me they were the correct beliefs while I was growing up. And then when as I grew older, as I learned more about the world, as I learned the bigger picture, that was when I realized that I was wrong about this. And so I think that Alaric's journey throughout the trilogy will mainly focus on him coming out from under the shadow of his father's regime and learning to be his own person and learning to do the right thing.
I like that you include so much of his perspective. So when the book first started, I thought it was just going to be from Talison's point of view. And then like chapter 3 or so, I think Alaric comes in and it's from his point of view. And I was like, oh, this makes it so much better because now we get to see behind the curtain of why the night
Yeah,
ended so bad.
I'm so glad that works for you because, well, I mean, I know that there are a lot of authors who are very good at writing just a single POV, but I can't do it. Like I personally I cannot do it. I always have to include multiple viewpoints because I feel like I'm not yet good enough to be able to create the whole story from just from one single person's point of view. And I think there's also a selfish motive because I just want to see the two of them fall in love. Like I don't want it to be just from her perspective. I want him to simp over her too.
I loved it too, and it was so good. And I really think in this book it works so well because you really do need his point of view. Otherwise, Taliesin is just angry at him the whole time, right? So if he only had her point of view, he would still be the big bad at the end. Um,
Yeah.
So you did it so well. So thank you.
Thank you.
um, so the two of them also have a pretty unique magic. And
Yes,
this is one of my favorite parts is the magic system in your book.
thank you.
So Taliesin can wield basically light.
Yes,
And
light
then
magic.
yeah, and then Alaric wields shadow magic, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's such a like uh very easy, like she's good because she wields light magic and he's bad because he wields shadow magic. And then as they're finding out how it works, it seems like those like black and whites are just gone, right? Which I really appreciated.
I think that for me, when I was starting out with creating the magic system, I think that for me, it was very important to try to get the nuance across. Like even though we think of light as pure and good, it can also be capable of terrible things. And even though, like, usually we think of shadows as evil, it can also be capable of like nurturing, like things can grow in the darkness, things can heal, while, for example, light can burn, light can scorch everything it touches, it can blind. So I really loved playing around with that, and I firmly believe that it all comes back to how everyone has both light and dark inside them. And yeah, as you mentioned, it's not always black and white.
Yeah, and the whole point of the story is they have to come together to stop something
Yes.
really terrible, and they work together unhappily for quite a while.
They work together with reluctance, with violent reluctance.
Excuse me. Yeah, so they I don't know, they just seem to want to hurt each other so much throughout the book. Then that was a lot of their sexual tension too, was them like fighting each other.
And I mean the line, I think there's a line in the book that says hate is another kind of passion. So it was basically riffing off of that, like that whole enemies to lovers thing, when you hate someone so much that you don't know whether to kiss them or to kill them. So that was the kind of dynamic that I was going for.
I liked it. It worked so well. And then I really liked Alaric's side, or like his best friend that's always with him. I can't
Oh my
remember his
gosh.
name.
Severin.
Severin, yeah. So he is hilarious. I I would read a whole novella of just Severin ripping on Alaric.
Okay, so funny story about Severin. He was not supposed to have that much screen time. Like he was just one of those minor characters that, he was there to further the plot, and he was just background basically. But then my editors, when they were reading the draft, they were like, "Hey, we need more scenes of the hot best friend. Can we make that happen?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" And I think like that really confirmed what a lot of my other author friends were telling me, that there will always be like this one supporting character who everyone flocks to and fangirls over, maybe even more than they fangirl over the main guy.
Well, I think it's because Severin is so like he's chill and Alaric is very not chill. um,
I think Severin is good for Alaric. Like
yeah.
he can try to mellow him out a bit.
And it's just great that Alaric has somebody in the story that is basically like the court jester that's allowed to make fun of him. It really humanizes Alaric. um, so part of the magic system is that there are these like magic wells that shoot up
Yes.
into the sky. So explain how those work.
Okay, so to go into the magic system, basically there's the real world and then there's Aether Space. And Aether Space is basically like I like to think of it as a honeycomb. Like it's full of these little pockets of dimensions where magical energy comes from. So there's a dimension for light, there's a dimension for shadow, there's a dimension for tempest magic, and the Aethermancer in this world is the person who can have the genetic ability to tap into any of these dimensions, or like to tap into a specific dimension and summon it into the real world. So there are places in the real world where the veil is sort of thin. The veil between the material realm and Aether Space is kind of fragile at these points, and it is at these points where the dimensions come roaring through and manifest in the real world. So there are the light severs, the shadow severs, and everything else. And the people of this world have learned to harness these severs and to use them for energy and as fuel for their technology and their weaponry. And yeah, that's it.
It's so it's just really cool how they like the wells are really places that the people who wield these types of magic can go and kind of recharge.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, I was thinking of it in terms of like video games where there's a save point or like a place where you can replenish your mana. and
yeah.
I think it was I think what was great about this writing process is that my editors, Julia and Natasha, basically just allowed me to do whatever I wanted. So I just put all the fun stuff that I wanted to write about, and that included stuff from my video gaming background. Like, so you get the severs or the save points.
That is magical. I didn't even think of them as like save points, but that's kind of what they are. And then you get like the cut scenes because they can go into these and relive memories.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it was very important for me to make sure that everything was connected. Like Aether Space connects time, and so one facet of time is memory, right? And so that's why the Aethermancers are able to see their memories in the wells of energy, because they're basically stepping into the great oneness, like a great place where everything is all linked to one another.
Yeah, it's just really cool. And then it gives Taliesin the chance to explore her background, which is really
Mhm.
sweet because she's so hardened by the war. And then you just need this moment of her feeling like a child and like getting loved. So, um, one of the things that I found interesting in the book though was the structure. So
Mhm,
there are there are like large cuts to time.
mhm.
How did you decide where to cut? And like I would just keep writing, and I think I would drive my editors insane if that was the case.
Well, I so about my writing process, I don't really outline.
Yeah.
Like I write as it comes to me, and I guess what helps me is I tend to when I write, I tend to imagine it as a movie or like a TV show. I imagine each chapter as an episode, and so I sort of just go with my gut on what the best place to cut it is, what the best scene to end on is. And as for how I decided whether to skip ahead or to linger on a scene, for me it was about deciding what was the most important aspect of the story. And so I really wanted to focus on the romance. And that's why the preceding chapters, like the first few chapters, are sort of like a speed run. because later on in the book they sort of hash it over anyway. They sort of talk about it and they develop an understanding from that. So I I really just wanted to get there and to get them talking and maybe falling in love.
I thought it worked really well because it just kind of like cut out like stuff that's not necessary. Um,
Yeah. And I was also concerned about the word count.
it is
Like
it's decent sized. Um, I forgot. My brain just disappeared. um, those those cutscenes though made it so much easier to get to the meat of the story. So I really like that you get a little bit of the war, but you also kind of settle into the main story pretty quickly. So
I'm so glad it worked for you. Thank you.
um the the other thing I wanted to ask is in your
Oh yeah.
introduction you mentioned AO3. Um
Yes.
so did you start writing there on Archive of Our Own?
Well, so okay, going way, way back, writing was always my favorite hobby ever since I was a kid. Like I'd pretend to be listening and making notes in class, but I would actually be scribbling away, like making short stories and poems, that sort of thing. In high school, I discovered the glory that was fan fiction. And that was what I focused on writing for maybe over a decade. And for me, it always just remained a hobby. Like I had other career goals in mind. I think growing up in an Asian family in Asia, everyone expects you to be either a doctor or a lawyer. And so there's no space to want anything else because that's just the way you've been wired. And then the pandemic happened, and my country was put under one of the world's longest lockdowns. Like it lasted I can't remember. It's all like a mental blackout. I can't remember if it lasted a year or if it was only several months. But anyway, it lasted a really long time and I was going a bit stir crazy and I was having to reevaluate what I wanted out of life, what my dreams were. Then I was contacted by Angeline Rodriguez, who is a force to be reckoned with in the publishing industry. And she read my fanfics on AO3 and she asked if I ever thought about writing an original novel. And so it was like a light bulb went off in my head and I gave it a shot. I was offered representation by Thao, who is like the best agent ever and who'd also read my fanfics. And she actually offered me representation based on the strength of them. And I haven't looked back since. I quit my office job, I deferred my grad school applications, and I finished one book and now I'm working on the next and I feel good about it. Like I feel that somehow this is what I was always meant to be doing and I really have AO3 to thank for that. There was a there is such a huge and vibrant and supportive community of fanfic readers and that's really important to me. Everyone was helping me stay sane during the lockdown. And I think it was because of their support, their various fan works for my fics that it really helped me get to where I am now.
I really think it's a great learning tool. You just get to learn so much about writing by simply writing and having people talk to you about it.
Yes, exactly. Like there are a lot of I was a member of a lot of Discord servers where everyone was just helping one another polish their fics, improve their writing. It's so great. Like I think that I will always be a fanfic writer at heart.
Well, the romance really comes through from the fanfic.
Oh yes, of course. The smut.
The smut. There's not much smut in this book, so I'm not disappointed. I just thought it was funny.
Um, so I actually wasn't sure if they were at that place yet where the smut would feel organic. And it was actually my editors who said you have to include a spicy scene in this book. You've been edging the reader for hundreds of pages. Something has got to give. And I was like, oh my God, my family is going to read this. My parents are going to read this. But anything for the story, anything to make the story as good as it can be. So yeah, so I what I can promise though is that there will be more spies in the sequel.
Well, I'm okay with that. Sounds good. It's gonna be awkward too, like if you're not sure who's gonna read it, right?
Right, yeah. I think my family told me, like, okay, so I have a huge family. Like, my dad has 7 siblings. And so all of them, all my aunts and uncles, they told me that they've all pre-ordered copies. And I was like, can I just give you a redacted copy where I tear out the chapter with a smut scene?
So I saw a really funny tweet from a romance writer who
Hmm.
said she didn't want her grandmother to read it. And of course, her grandmother read her smutty book and was like, it's not very imaginative.
Oh my,
And so, like, that's my biggest fear now is like, it's just not going to be good enough.
the worst. I at first I didn't think that there would be anything worse than your parents or your family reading your smut. But now I know that there is something worse. Your family like criticizing your smut. That's so bad.
But, it's
Oh my God,
part of,
now I have one fear.
well, it's just funny though. I mean, they're people, they've all had smut, right?
I feel like my mom might have something to say about my smut scenes because I actually she has a huge collection of romance novels, like from the 90s,
Oh,
from yeah, like these really battered paperbacks, and and of course they were very spicy, and they were actually how I learned about sex. Like
see,
yes,
that's how I did too.
yes, I would ransack my mom's collection of romance novels with the shirtless men on the cover and the swooning women. And then, like, I was really young, so it took me a few years before I understood what I was reading. Like, oh, so this is what is happening.
So I used to check them out from the library, and I was like, oh gosh, like those librarians, those poor librarians when I was a kid. So
That's amazing. Librarians truly do God's work.
they do indeed. So you mentioned that you're still writing the second book, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm currently, well, it's not going well. Like,
Oh,
I think I think sophomore slump is real, but I actually last night I just had a breakthrough on some plot thing, but I can't really talk about yet. But yeah, I had the breakthrough last night while I was drinking iced coffee, and I just realized, oh, okay, yeah, let's do this so that stuff moves along. And I think I finally hit a rhythm. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it takes me.
it's always got to be hard to write these, like, it's supposed to be a trilogy and somebody's asked you to start. So you don't just have the story going already and they split it into books. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I told myself after I finished book one, I told myself, okay, book two is going to be different. I'm going to make an outline. But no, it just never happened.
Cancers are very real. Like it's a very real thing. You just fly by the seat of your pants, and that's perfectly fine. I feel like stories are pretty organic that way. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I think that everyone just has their own process when it comes to writing, and there's no wrong or right way to go about it.
yeah, so I'm excited. Do you know when it's supposed to be due? Like when it's supposed to come out or anything like that?
So we are shooting for an October 2024 publication date for the sequel. I almost said the title. I'm not allowed to yet. So yeah, we're aiming for it to come out exactly a year after the Hurricane Wars is released in the US. So yeah, I'm gonna try my best to stick to that deadline.
I mean, if it goes longer, that's okay. We understand. I'll be waiting. Don't worry. Um, well, thank you so much for joining me, Thea.
Thank you so much for having me. This was my first podcast interview, and it was really great.
Perfect. I'm sure you're going to get a lot more considering how much, like, how good that book is. So just expect it pretty soon.
Thank you.
Um, the book comes, when does the book come out?
It comes out October 3rd in the US.
Yes, October
As
3rd.
for the UK, I think October 12th.
Ooh. Does it release in the Philippines at the same time as the US or the UK?
I have no idea.
That's fun.
The Philippines is using the US cover,
Oh, okay.
so I think that Philippine bookstores will sort of take their lead from the US, but it will I doubt that it'll show up here on the same day. But
Okay.
we'll yeah.
It's always strange because like it's in US or UK dates, and I'm like, oh, but what about the rest of the world?
I know. Although I it's also going to come out in Canada, Australia,
Ooh,
Spain, and wait, so those are the three that I am at liberty to confirm. That those are the three countries where it will also come out.
perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
And check out the Hurricane Wars October 3rd in the US. It's pretty fantastic and the magic is fun. The romance is spicy. Yeah. Uh, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.